Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is Bloomberg Business of Sports.
The business of sports can be intimidating or hard for a startup to break into.
We really appreciate when our owners are actually there, with us through the journey.
Teams, ours especially, have been very intentional to diversify at all levels of the company.
I think we're in the golden years for the NFL and college football.
Our demographic reach has continued to expand.
This is going to be really unlocking the streaming platform for sports fans.
Sports valuations are rising. We'll see when they peak.
You don't have to be the best in your sport to make a whole ton of money.
Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio. Hello, this is the Bloomberg Business of Sports show where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with my colleagues Scarlet and Damian Sassower. We have a big show today. The NFL's regular season is getting underway this weekend. We'll check in on the team everyone in the league is chasing, the Kansas City Chiefs. We'll hear from Chiefs president Mark Donovan as the team seeks out another Super Bowl win.
It's amazing the knowledge that our fan base across the world has of our franchise and of our experience at Arrowhead. And, I've heard from so many fans who, the bucket list is to get to DHA Field. They have to do that. And it's because of the experience.
We'll also hear from Clark and Dan Hunt, co-owners of the Chiefs. It's from one of the latest features from Bloomberg Big Take.
There's been so much new wealth generation across the globe. And the NFL for so long traditionally was just an American ownership and an American game, if you will. But, the market and how the NFL has thought about growing its businesses has targeted, football globally.
All that and more is on the way on the Bloomberg Business of Sports. But first, after going back and forth for a while, NFL owners finally voted to allow private equity firms to buy stakes in teams. To take us deeper into what the move means and how it could shape the league, we welcome Goldman Sachs executive Nicole Pullen-Ross. She's regional head of Goldman's New York Private Wealth Management Unit and PWM Sports and Entertainment Solutions leader. Nicole, welcome to the Bloomberg Business of Sports. I wish I had some money to invest now for the Lions.
It's a process. Sounds like there's something to look forward to, but it's a pleasure to be here with you all. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Now, first, I should add that only a few private equity firms are involved in this because the league had to sign off on them.
There is a short list of private equity firms that have been identified to participate at the beginning. That's a bit different than the approach that other leagues have taken. But you're absolutely right. There are a few organizations with experience and size that have been identified as they begin this journey.
And these investors can buy stakes in as many as 6 teams at once, although their stakes are capped at 10% versus, say, 30% in the NBA. Nicole, we spoke with the NFL's Executive Vice President, Joe Seclair, and he made clear that discussions on allowing private equity to invest in teams actually began in 2018, about 6 years ago. From your perspective, how has demand from institutional investors to invest in the NFL teams evolved during that time?
It's really happened pretty rapidly. And just again, to orient the perspective that I have, in addition to the perspective that our colleagues in investment banking have as they work with clients around financing stadiums and other strategic priorities. From a private wealth management perspective, over the past several years, the interest that our clients have had in getting exposure to the space has increased meaningfully. We work with more than 100 team owners. And so importantly, we've heard from many of them how excited they were to have additional capital coming into the league. As you know, valuations have increased meaningfully, and the ability to have additional liquidity, particularly as it relates to the limited partners, is something that many team owners have been looking forward to over the past several years.
So Nicole, if you could just walk me through this. I understand that, NFL franchises would vote in favor of having private equity investors. Number one, it increases the valuation of their franchises so they can raise more money for liquidity purposes. They can cash out, et cetera. Yes, they can also raise more money to help renovate or build stadiums. I get that. But talk to me about estate planning. I mean, let's talk about Virginia McCaskey, the 101-year-old owner of the Chicago Bears. She has one living child. The tax burden that would place if she were to pass the estate. So is that the real reason that the NFL is making this change?
I think that there's certainly, if you look at the on ownership interest within this space, and in some families, the generations that are investors and owners of the teams, it has certainly been a factor as it relates to some of the transactions we've seen across leagues and across teams, as well as a factor in terms of one of the ways that we help our clients in terms of thinking about structures that can be put in place when thinking about tax planning and trust and estate planning. So I certainly think that it is a consideration, and many clients will think about liquidity, tax considerations, et cetera, as it relates to the tax and estate planning considerations that they'll have, particularly across generations. I think one of the big drivers, though, is really around the liquidity for minority stakes. If you think about it today, with the average valuation in the NFL approaching $6 billion, double where it was just 5 years ago, the number of individuals who are able to be a sole owner is a pretty short list. It's a pretty short list of folks who can have that majority stake. And so the ability to have greater access and greater ownership diversification, I think, is a catalyst as well as the valuations have continued to increase.
One thing we should mention that in addition to the 3 PE firms who were pre-approved to participate in investments, there's also a consortium comprised of Blackstone, Carlyle, CVC, Dynasty Equity, and Ludus, which is a platform founded and led by Pro Football Hall of Famer Curtis Martin. Nicole, I know that your division, you work with athletes who have clearly significantly increasing levels of wealth, whether they are athletes just starting out or athletes who have been at it for a long time. What kind of demand is there from former players or current players about investing in the NFL or in any sports league for that matter?
It's really been interesting. It's if you think about our clients in general, they often like to invest in the thing that they know well. Mm-hmm. And that certainly translates to our clients who are athletes. And I would say the trend that we've seen from those clients over the past several years has been to gradually get exposure. And so for some clients, that means the local soccer league that allows them to get connected to the community and to have a presence in a growing sport. For other clients, it has meant thinking about opportunities more globally, looking at international trends. And for some, as you have seen, the interest in investing in women's sports, particularly in the WNBA, has been an area of interest and focus there as well. And so it's really great to see the athletes wanting to both support and translate the passion that they have for sports into investment, both to help grow an industry that they're passionate about, and also support communities that they care deeply about as well.
Nicole, I wonder if you could help me better understand. We have a lot of very wealthy former NFL players like Tom Brady and Chris Collinsworth, people who have a voice, people who are either sports commentators, they're visible. And I'm curious what the rules around their ability to participate as an owner of a franchise are. If you follow what I'm saying, are there restrictions against people who are in the public eye who can kind of sway opinions toward their franchises? Is that a consideration now? Like, is that something that the NFL is looking at? Like, oh, Tom Brady can't buy a team because he works for Fox. Is that something that's been addressed?
I don't know specifically how that's been addressed in recent changes. I know that there are considerations for sure in terms of whether athletes can have ownership stakes in their existing league. Again, whether they're active or former players certainly play a role in that. There's certainly much more flexibility in former players having the opportunity to invest. And we see many, many examples of that as it relates to the ability for a former player to leverage their platform. I think that's very hard to manage. If you think about some of the former athletes who have platforms in media, whether it's through broadcast, et cetera, it's hard for them to limit the passion they have for their home team. And so I do think that's a consideration in terms of how that translates to the team owners or the considerations that the teams will have. As you know, for the NFL, they have included language in their agreement where they'll be looking through to individual investors and have a voice there, which is definitely something I don't believe we've seen in other leagues. So that will be a factor that will be interesting to see how that evolves as well.
Increasingly, you have individual investors as well as institutional investors seeing sports as an asset class, part of their portfolio. And one thing the NFL made clear is that there's a 6-year time limit, or I should say minimum 6-year investment in the teams, when PE firms tend to work on 3 to 4 year timelines. I'm curious, for the clients you serve, Nicole, what is their time horizon when they're looking at investing in sports?
It really depends on the investor. And it's a great question because I do think there is a distinction that's important. So historically, you've had family offices, family ownership interest of teams, and they tend to have a very long investment horizon. And increasingly, you are seeing diversification in that ownership group where you're seeing, yes, that same passion and wanting to invest, but also the ability to potentially take advantage of valuations that are changing much more rapidly. Mm-hmm. So we all know about Dial and the investment that they had made in the Phoenix Suns in 2021 at $1.5 billion. For just 18 months later, the valuation at that time was at $1.5 billion. The valuation when the team was sold at just 18 months later was at $4 billion. And so there is certainly a shift in how rapidly valuations are changing. But generally speaking, when our clients are looking at getting invested in the space, if they are investing passively through a fund, as an example, it is the expectation typically that fund life is 10 years, generally speaking, when we're thinking about private equity investing.
Our thanks to Nicole Pullen-Ross of Goldman Sachs. She is the regional head of the firm's New York Private Wealth Management Unit and PWM Sports and Entertainment Solutions leader. Up next, we stick with football and hear from Kansas City Chiefs owner Dan and Clark Hunt, plus a conversation with Kansas City Chiefs team president Mark Donovan. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports show, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with my colleagues Scarlet and Damian Sassower. We've got another NFL season getting underway with a full slate of games over this weekend, and the New York Jets and San Francisco 49ers capping off Week 1 on Monday night. But the season started with the Kansas City Chiefs on Thursday Night Football against the Baltimore Ravens. The Chiefs won, by the way, 27-20 over the Ravens. The game ended with a video review after Lamar Jackson appeared to hit Isaiah Likely in the back of the end zone with no time left for a touchdown.
Lamar trying to make magic happen, throw it end zone, Likely 2 feet down, yes, touchdown!
The video showed Likely's toe on the line, though, and the call was overturned and the pass ruled incomplete.
The runner's toe hit out of bounds. It's an incomplete pass. The game is over. Kansas City has won.
The Chiefs are the reigning NFL dynasty, and they're looking to add another Super Bowl title this year, looking to go 3 in a row. No team has ever done that. Bloomberg Originals chief correspondent Jason Kelly and Bloomberg Dallas bureau chief Julie Fine spoke with Chiefs co-owner Dan and Clark Hunt recently for Bloomberg Big Take. They covered a lot of ground in the conversation, including their reaction to the NFL allowing private equity firms to have stakes in teams. Let's listen to that portion of the conversation, starting with Clark Hunt's thoughts on what stood out most to him following the NFL's decision.
Probably the biggest surprise has been the breadth of the interest in the NFL. I knew that there would be a lot of interest, but it's probably been even broader than I thought it would be. It goes beyond the funds that have been raised to focus specifically on professional sports. So I think it's going to give the NFL a great opportunity to have a significant group of very interested investors who can support the league's capital needs on a go-forward basis.
Dan, you've been around all of these sports for a long time. This broad interest, where's it coming from in your estimation in terms of the potential value going forward?
Yeah, I mean, there's been so much new wealth generation across the globe. And the NFL for so long traditionally was just an American ownership and an American game, if you will. But, you know, the market and how the NFL has thought about growing its businesses is targeted, you know, football globally speaking. And I mean, you got games coming up in Brazil the first time. And I just think so many more people are interested in it. And soccer is the global game, right? And so we have international owners in that business in Major League Soccer. I've been surprised, I feel like his assistant sometimes, with the amount of phone calls I receive with people wanting to talk about the private equity opportunity in the NFL. And I would always say, well, if you're calling about that, I'm not even going to bother connecting you. But it's been really great to see. But I just think there's been so much new wealth generation globally, and sports teams are prizes, and you've seen this unbelievable escalation in asset valuations. And, you know, been so fun to be part of it. And you think back to our history and our investment in these teams. I believe our investment in the Kansas City Chiefs is $25,000. Our investment in the Chicago Bulls is $67,000. And now what these franchises are worth today.
That's Kansas City Chiefs co-owner Dan Hunt, along with his brother and fellow co-owner Clark Hunt, speaking with our Jason Kelly and Julie Fine. It's part of a larger conversation for Bloomberg Big Take with the billionaire sports family that dove into their aspirations not only for the Chiefs in the NFL, but how they're looking to expand globally and how they're planning for the World Cup coming up in 2026. They also spoke about soaring team valuations. Here's that portion of the conversation, starting with where Clark Hunt sees valuations going.
I don't think we've peaked. I think there's still a lot of growth in front of both leagues. Certainly Major League Soccer, as the younger, newer entrant, is probably going to grow faster. There's a lot of upside from a revenue standpoint for Major League Soccer. And if you look at some of the valuations around the world in the sport of soccer, there's a lot of room to run. But I also think the NFL has a very bright future as well, not only in terms of growth domestically, but we talked a little bit about internationally. And there's a big opportunity for the NFL to grow its brand, its following internationally, and that should help lift valuations.
That's Kansas City Chiefs co-owner Clark Hunt, along with his brother and fellow co-owner Dan Hunt, speaking with our colleagues Jason Kelly and Julie Fine for Bloomberg Big Take. You can hear more on the Hunt brothers in the latest edition of the Big Take podcast. Find that and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Now we stick with football and the Chiefs and turn to a conversation from earlier this week with Mark Donovan, president of the Kansas City Chiefs. He spoke with our colleagues Jason Kelly and Vanessa Perdomo of Bloomberg Originals, as well as our pal Damian Sassower. Let's take a listen to that conversation.
So the world's largest tailgate. I mean, look, you know, I'm a skinny guy, but I mean, I love to eat, and we all know about the Arrowhead Stadium crazies. Talk to us about the world's largest tailgate. What's it all about?
You know, the world's largest tailgate came from our marketing team trying to find a way to help us accomplish our goal of being the world's team. With the expansion of international rights, we really have invested in that aggressively to try to expand what we call Chiefs Kingdom in terms of our fan base. And the international game last year helped us do that. We played internationally in London, we played in Mexico City. We've seen the success of that. So what we were trying to do is find a way to bring the world to one of the coolest experiences in all of professional sports, which is tailgating at Arrowhead Stadium and GHA Field. And our creative team worked with a lot of really talented people in the entertainment world and came up with the idea of a live simulcast, basically, that gives everyone around the world the opportunity to be live with us at tailgate prior to the kickoff of the NFL season. It's a great way to bring the world to Arrowhead as we kick off the NFL season.
That's really, it's really interesting. I think when you think about being the world's team and bringing in this international audience into the NFL fandom, a tailgate and the NFL really around the culture is very American, right? So how do you bring that into the international audience, and what do other people in other countries think about this coming into what is a tailgate, what is cornhole? How do you bring that into the world audience?
It's really interesting. I'll go back to the experiences we've had in London, in Mexico City, and in Frankfurt last year. It's amazing the knowledge that our fan base across the world has of our franchise and of our experience at Arrowhead. And, I've heard from so many fans who, the bucket list is to get to DHA Field. They have to do that. And it's because of the experience. So how do you export that, right? How do you create it so that millions and millions can participate? I think the other thing to think about from a strategic standpoint for us as a business is this is a step in that direct-to-consumer strategy, right? So this is a way of creating that relationship with another either fan or potential fan. And then once you have that connection, how do you utilize that to continue to grow those relationships? The other thing we found with things like World's Largest Tailgate is the demographics are a little bit different than you would see at a typical in-attendance stadium. Not only limited, in our case, to 72,000 people, but you have no limitation on the number of people, but also you have a different demo that's taking part today in a live stream versus something, being live in person. So both of those things play into it. And then it's just capitalizing on what we're known for, which is tailgating. And sometimes we're introducing tailgating to new fans. And sometimes it's just letting them be part of the experience that they already know very well.
So, Mark, we're catching you at a fascinating moment in the history of the NFL, and it's a league you're very familiar with. You came to Kansas City from the Eagles, another, incredibly well-known and successful franchise with long-term ownership, just like you have there in Kansas City. There's a new entrant, as it were, from the money side coming in private equity. Your boss, Clark Hunt, led the committee on the NFL that ultimately sort of approved this next step. How do you think, as someone who understands the business of not just the team, but the league so intimately, how does that affect things in the short and medium term in terms of competitiveness, in terms of investment? Like, what's the bottom line for you?
Well, number one, it's a transformational policy. As much as we modeled it after other sports leagues and tried to learn from those experiences, this one is truly modeled to take advantage and augment the strength of our league model, as well as create opportunities to bring diverse investment into that atmosphere. It's interesting that you posed the question the way you did and cited my experience in Philly and Kansas City. I think those are two good models to look at from the standpoint of every franchise is going to look at this opportunity a little differently.
Yeah.
And every franchise owner is going to look at it as their own objectives in utilizing this or not utilizing it. And I think in the case of both Philadelphia, knowing Jeffrey Lurie and his management team really, really well, I think they'll take a different look at this.
Yep.
They'll take a different perspective on it than, Clark and his family and the siblings will take their own perspective on it. And I think when you look across the ownership group of the National Football League, you see a pretty diverse and wide mix of individuals and organizations and how they approach these things. So one of the biggest challenges that Clark and the policy team that put this together, who deserve, by the way, a lot of credit. They've been working on this for multiple years, and I witnessed it firsthand to see just how much time and effort Clark was putting into getting this right, because they understood just how transformational this policy change would be. So they deserve a lot of credit for that. But I think it's very interesting to see how each one of these franchises and each ownership group will look at it differently. And look, the reality is that they're also going to utilize it differently.
Yeah.
You've got certain people who are like, this is a great opportunity to capitalize on the value of my franchise. You get other opportunities where like we need capital infusion for this. So here's an opportunity to do that, which we didn't have before. So it's an exciting time. It will be very interesting, I think, as an industry to see sort of who comes to the table, who takes advantage of this, and how they take advantage of it. Obviously, it's going to have some say into valuations.
Yeah.
You've got a different group looking at valuations. This isn't a prospective owner of a franchise who may have other reasons to purchase a team. This is a true, analytics-driven investment group that is looking for a return on investment. So the valuations are going to be interesting for us to watch too.
That's Kansas City Chiefs President Mark Donovan speaking with Jason Kelly and Vanessa Perdomo of Bloomberg Originals and our very own Damian Sassower. Coming up, we'll hear more of that conversation. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports, Bloomberg Radio around the world.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio.
Thanks for joining us on the Bloomberg Business of Sports show, where we explore the big money issues in the world of sports. I'm Michael Barr, along with Scarlet and Damian Sassower. We're listening in on a conversation with Kansas City Chiefs President Mark Donovan. He spoke with my colleagues Jason Kelly, Vanessa Perdomo, and Damian earlier this week. Let's dive back into their conversation.
You know, Mark, I may look young, but I was actually born in 1974, so I'm 50 years old. But Arrowhead Stadium, built in 1972, third oldest stadium in the NFL. And yet, here we go. Fast forward to 2026, you're going to be hosting the World Cup. And you're planning $800 million worth of renovations or some crazy number, seating bowls, luxury amenities. I mean, what a time to be alive. I mean, Mark, talk to us about what's going on at Arrowhead. How are you going to get all this done in time for the World Cup?
Yeah, so it's an exciting time to be part of this organization. It's an exciting time to be a fan of this franchise and an exciting time to be part of this region. And you cited two very good examples. The first is World Cup. We'll do about a $42 million renovation, actually adjustment to our building to be able to host World Cup. And that investment is strictly to be able to host the games. Really proud of our sports commission, our city, political leaders on both sides of the state line who came together with us and the soccer franchises that are in the region with the Sporting KC team and also the Kansas City Current, who all came together to put a bid together that I think puts Kansas City on a map it's never been before. If you think about the cities that won the right to host the World Cup, we're definitely the smallest. And then the fact that FIFA looked at us from a venue standpoint, from the long history of Lamar Hunt's commitment to soccer, and they gave us a quarterfinal game. That's a really impressive accomplishment for this market size and for this region and for the individuals who are part of that. For us, from an operational standpoint, we have to get ready to host that event and do it better than anybody else does it, but also make all these adjustments to host FIFA World Cup soccer and then be able to adjust modularly back to NFL over 4 seasons. Construction actually started on that project this past off season with putting in some of the infrastructure below the field. And now next season, we'll do some of the seating bowl adjustments. We'll put the stadium back the way it is today for our NFL games. And then we'll make that adjustment again going into the 26th season and then put it back together after that. So that's a huge project in itself, and it really benefits the region. And then the second, the $800 million renovation of Arrowhead is one of the options we're looking at right now. Our lease expires at Arrowhead in 2031. So if you look at the timeline we're on, it's time to consider, should we build a brand new stadium? Should we build a new stadium somewhere else? Should we renovate Arrowhead? And the first thing we looked at last April was, what would it cost? Could we, number one, renovate a stadium that, as you said, opened in 1972? But also, what would that allow us to do? What amenities can we bring into this iconic building? And is that the best decision moving forward for our fans, for this franchise, and for the future?
I think that's really interesting when you're talking about the different options you have, what's the best for the fans. When you speak with fans and you guys are talking about that, how do you engage with them about what they would want? I think a lot of the times when we're seeing, let's say in European football or soccer, that fans are very dedicated to keep their stadiums that have all this history. And here it's almost, we want the nicest, the biggest, the most innovative stadiums. So when you're thinking about that, what do you think about Arrowhead keeping the history or just having this massively big, innovative, tech-driven stadium?
Yeah, I think that it's a great question. And the generic answer is yes, because all of those discussions are happening and all of those opinions are being shared. I think the unique situation that we are in, which is one that we're embracing, is we have an opportunity to upgrade and renovate one of the most iconic buildings in sports. I mentioned earlier, in discussions with people in Frankfurt, Germany, London, Mexico City, how many times I hear I've got to get to GHA Field. I have to experience the Arrowhead experience. Mm-hmm. So when you think about that perspective, it's, how do we renovate this thing to, number one, make it functionally and foundationally strong to get through the next 25 or 30 years? And then number two, how do we expand on the fan experience? How do we create the things that are in the newest and coolest buildings that are being built brand new today? Versus the opportunity to build a brand new building. In the obvious and most easy example from a comparison standpoint is if we're able to build a brand new domed stadium, what does that open up for this region in terms of opportunity? Super Bowls, Big 12 championships, Final Fours, expanded concert series, as well as creating a new and, from an amenity standpoint, stadium that really competes with the best in the world. And I would say to your initial question, I get feedback that is almost directly 50-50. I get a lot of hardcore fans that come to me, it's like, don't leave Arrowhead. We need to keep this tradition alive. We want you to stay. And I get a lot of fans who come up to me and say, build a dome so we can bring even more exciting stuff here. And so it's an evaluation we're going through. We have the additional opportunity that we have multiple states where our market really sits. We sit on the state line of Kansas and Missouri, so there's opportunities on both sides of the state line. And that's one of the things that we've committed to do the proper due diligence to make sure we're making the right decision going forward.
Sounds like the fans are really making it easy for you there.
Yeah, it's not an easy decision, but we're going to make the right decision.
Yeah, NFL fans are known for not being very opinionated, Mark. I mean, they're just go with the flow, especially Chiefs fans. They're just whatever works for you. Yeah. I did have one question as we start to wrap up, which is, I've spent some time of late, and there's a story out on the Bloomberg terminal right now about the Hunt family and this, massive sports portfolio that this, historic family has built up over time, which obviously includes your franchise, also FC Dallas, a stake in the Chicago Bulls. So they've got their hands in a lot of things. You're deeply involved with the family. You sit on the board, I believe, of the strategic ventures arm of the Hunt family. Put yourself in the investor mindset in a Bloomberg way here. Where are you looking? Where are the investment opportunities in sports at this moment? Because you sit at such an interesting perch to see that. What are you looking at?
Yeah, I would answer that question a couple ways. One is I think it's hard to argue the value of the National Football League as an entity, and then the individual franchises that make up that value. So that's number one. You're starting at a very, very strong base. And then you look at the individual franchises and how they're operating and the things they're doing. And if you look at our business track record over the last decade, we've been one of the most successful franchises from a business operations standpoint in the entire league. And that's speaking from a market that's probably 30th, 33rd right. DMA in the country. So, that's over-indexing pretty significantly. I think more importantly, the insider perspective that I would provide from a value of the Chiefs franchise is the Hunt family and the stability that they provide, number one. But number two, and I don't think Clark and his siblings get enough credit for it, but they are following in the footsteps of one of the most amazing innovators in all of sport. When you look at the impact that Lamar Hunt has had on football, soccer, tennis, and the fact that he's in multiple Hall of Fames across multiple sports shows that impact. They're following that lead. And I think when you look at it from an investment standpoint, it's investing in an organization that is going to be innovative, that is going to take advantage of opportunities like we are with the international opportunity, and be willing to take risk, but also do it in a methodical way so that you're taking good risk. And, I'll go back to the international piece as the most interesting example recently. And that is that, we looked at, hey, we've got to take advantage of this German opportunity. We invested for 2.5 years prior to even getting a game. And that investment was with the hope of getting a game. And that investment paid off significantly when we did get the game. So it proved the model, but we had to take the risk and be innovative on the front end. Just to bring that story full circle, we had our game last year in Frankfurt. It was a huge success for us. We invested a ton of people, resources, and money against that game. We had 4 or 5 international partners, German-based companies that were sponsors of us, our organization, and our game. This year, we don't have a game. We probably won't have a game again in Germany for a number of years. And this year, following that, we just signed our largest international deal in our history.
Wow.
So it proves to that the model, but I think the model doesn't work without that commitment to being methodical, but also being innovative in how you look at these kind of investments.
Mark, the term three-peat is a registered trademark owned by one Pat Riley, Heat president, former Lakers Hall of Fame coach. It's a term that's associated with teams like the Yankees, the Bulls, the Lakers, Real Madrid. Not a lot of teams have done it in professional sports, but the 2024 Kansas City Chiefs, I mean, my goodness, you have an opportunity to do it. Talk to me. Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice, who should I draft for my fantasy team this year?
Again, I'll answer the same way. Yes. The opportunity is pretty amazing. We know the stage we're on. We know the opportunity that's in front of us. I've been sharing this perspective all preseason. Brett Veach, our general manager, has done an amazing job of putting together a roster and really an organization that is operating at a very, very, very high level. You got a Hall of Fame coach in Andy Reid who is, he gets giddy when Brett gives him new toys to play with in terms of athletes and players and ways that coach can take advantage of their special skills. And then you've got, leadership on the player side that, it's really tough to match. And their experience together is something that I think makes it uniquely valuable. Having said all that, these guys are taking the approach, which I'm really proud of, which is they understand how hard they've worked over the past 2 years to be on this stage and to have this opportunity. And their whole attitude is go take advantage of this. Do things the way we do things and take advantage of this opportunity.
That's Kansas City Chiefs President Mark Donovan speaking with special guest hosts Jason Kelly and Vanessa Perdomo of Bloomberg Originals and, of course, our pal Damian Sassower. Our thanks to them, and our thanks to you for joining us on another edition of the Bloomberg Business of Sports. For my colleagues Damian Sassower and Scarlet Fu, I'm Michael Barr. Tune in again next week for the latest on the stories moving big money in the world of sports. You're listening to the Bloomberg Business of Sports from Bloomberg Radio around the world.